Hi everyone, welcome to Rescuing Watches. This time around we have a very old Zenith pocket watch. Or rather, the leftovers of what it used to be. This one is probably from the 1920s or 1930s. I got it from an online auction and yeah, there were not many buyers interested and I'm sure you can't tell why. To be honest, it's looking worse than I expected, at least on the outside. But I thought, hey, this is the first chance we have to work on a pocket watch here on the channel. I'm sure this meant something to someone many years ago and it would be a cool project to try to bring it back. So here we are. The watch was listed as non-running, so it's not surprising that we don't see anything happening after winding, but the dial looks very cool, so let's keep our fingers crossed. If that's in good shape, we might have something to work with. So let's go ahead and open the case back. And have a look at this. We have a very nice engraving written in German. Presented by the Albert Meyer-Bolliger family, Schlieren 14th of July 1932, which would make this watch more than 90 years old at this point. We can see some symbols engraved inside the case back, so let's have a look. The 8.00 means that the case is made of 80% pure silver. There is something looking like a 7 here, I'm not sure what this means. And this one is a copper kalim, which is a bird, and the hallmark for 80% silver in Switzerland. This last one is the old Zenith logo with the starry night. They went through a lot of logo redesigns over the years until they settled for the modern version on the right. There is a second case back, so we need the case opener back. This one sits directly on top of the movement, and check this out. We don't see these golden movements very often in modern watches. These are made out of gold-plated brass, and this one has a bit of a frosted finish. Quite dirty, but not as bad as the outside, and I don't see any signs of rust yet, which is always good news. The reason pocket watches have two case backs is that it's a design carried over from even older watches that required a separate key for winding. Before the mid-1800s, the inner caseback on pocket watches had a hole in it where you would put a key and turn the barrel outward directly. So basically, the function of the outer cover was to avoid dust going into that keyhole. After the keyless works was invented in 1845, this was not necessary anymore, but both casebacks were kept as additional protection against dust. What I'm trying to do now is to take the stem out of the movement, but it's clearly not working. This is not moving at all. Let me check one last time, but this doesn't seem to be the setting lever screw that holds the stem in place. I think it's just one of the bridge screws. Which means that we have to continue from the front before I break something. And check this out. It's not bad. Well, not perfect either. We have some dirt and yellowing, but it could be worse. Enamel dials are quite fragile and prone to cracking. If you look in the center, you can see a little crack, but apart from that, I think most of it can be cleaned. Let me check. Okay, the dirt comes right off with some Rodico. We will have to dedicate some time to clean the dial, but it seems doable. The good thing is that the crack is visible now because there's dirt in it, but I'm hoping that after the cleaning it's barely noticeable. This type of watch hands are called Breguet hands. You can tell by the hole at the tip that makes them look a bit like a moon, and it's because, as many other watch parts, were invented by Abraham Louis Breguet in the 18th century. As you might have guessed, this shape makes the hands very delicate, so I keep them stored inside this membrane box, which keeps them suspended in between two plastic layers. Now, the stem is going through the movement from the upper side, so the only thing that comes to mind is to carefully push the bottom part until it's outside of the case, and then try to slide the whole thing out. Good. Better than expected. In case it was not obvious, pocket watches are not something I usually work with, so we might find ourselves in this kind of situation more than once today. And this is the movement ring that got left behind and holds the movement in position. The case will need a lot of work, but let's set it aside for now because we first need to find out why this watch is not working, and the main reason is that pocket watch parts can be very hard to find. This is a bit of a double-edged sword. Usually it's recommended if you get into watch repair or want to give it a try, to get one of these pocket watches as a first project because of its size. Everything is 3 to 4 times bigger than in a wristwatch, so that makes things easier. However, keep in mind, these watches are very old and watch brands stopped making them a long time ago, which means that the stock of spare parts is low and it can be very challenging to find what you're looking for. Especially because these movements are quite different. And this is one example of it. Take a look at this keyless works. This looks nothing like the ones we have been working with, and there is this part on the side that looks like it's made to slide towards a stem. I've never seen that before. We can already see a concerning amount of grease on the dial washer and the hour wheel where they shouldn't be any. Everything feels quite sticky, Canon pinion included, which is the part where the center wheel is attached to from the other side of the movement, so we have to take that out first, otherwise the center wheel won't come off later. Now, the first thing I want to see is if the balance wheel spins freely, and it looks like it does, so that's great. This watch doesn't have a shock protection system for the balance jewels. The Incablock system, which was the most widespread one, was patented in the early 30s and it was very successful, but movement manufacturers did not implement it until mid-30s, so a few years after our pocket watch was made. That means that if our watch was dropped in the past, the balance wheel pivots would most likely have been broken. What's very cool about this balance wheel is that it's temperature compensated with an inner layer of steel and an outer layer of brass, which is split at 2 different points. This is a very clever engineering trick, and it's needed because back then hairsprings were made out of high carbon steel. The problem is that steel's elasticity changes with temperature, which means that when it gets warmer, the hairspring gets weaker and the balance rate decreases, so it rotates slower. And as you can imagine, this is not good news if you want to keep time accurately. But if your balance is made of steel on the inside and brass on the outside, when the temperature increases, the balance rim bends towards the inside and keeps the oscillation rate constant. We are finding grease all over the place. On the screws, under the ratchet wheel, around the arbor, all of this is coming out of the barrel. This part here is the click, and it's designed so it can move despite being screwed in place. And instead of the small click spring underneath that we usually see in wristwatches, we have this long arm that pushes it back into place. Some of these parts had to be completely redesigned to fit into a 33mm case, which was the preferred size on wristwatches, I'd say, across the 30s, 40s, and 50s as well. And that not only means downsizing parts, but also rearranging the movement layout, especially the train of wheels, adding the shock absorption systems that we mentioned before, since wearing a watch on the wrist makes it more likely to get hit, improving the dial and hands design for legibility, and all sorts of other things. This is the crown wheel collar. It's the last part on top of the barrel bridge, and it's there to make sure that the crown and the ratchet wheels are well aligned. Until now everything looks okay, quite dirty but nothing broken so far. I think it's safe to say that the movement has not been serviced in a very long time, if ever. We slowly go with the screwdriver in the slots between the bridge and the main plate and take it off. All of the stains that you're seeing on top of the main plate are old oil that definitely should not be here. So it might be that someone serviced this watch long time ago and was overly generous with the lubrication. The problem is that excess oil will start moving around and finds its way into places where you don't want any lubrication, and even if that doesn't happen, it will dry up with time and get to the point of preventing the pivots to turn properly and even stop the watch. So that could very well be the case here. The train of wheels bridge goes out slowly. Okay. Oh, this is exactly what I was talking about. The fourth wheel is stuck to the jewel because of dried up oil. We'll have a closer look at the jewels, but they seem to be in good shape. We have 15 jewels in total in this movement, since we don't see any in the center wheel, which is already quite a high number for a watch from the 30s. Zenith is one of the oldest Swiss watch brands still alive today, founded in 1865, and by the 1900s they already had a well-established reputation of making very reliable and accurate pocket watches. They won a gold medal for that in the Paris Universal Exhibition. But they didn't stop there. Zenith is most known for its caliber 135 that was introduced in 1948, and it's an iconic movement. It's the only one that won the chronometry competition during 5 years in a row. As you can see, the pallet fork is also stuck onto the bridge. What you might know Zenith for, though, is for making one of the first, often referred as the first automatic chronograph movement called El Primero in 1969. The movement side is done. Now the remaining parts of the keyless works are on the dial side. We have this very cool bridge with many holes on top, and these are not decorative. If you have a closer look, you can see that the holes are always showing two parts that meet each other, so it's made this way to inspect and lubricate the parts without having to remove the bridge. We are way past this point now, we have to remove the whole thing, and as expected, plenty of oil here as well. And this looks amazing. Lots of things going on here. This is the setting lever. This part seems to be the yoke with two more parts pressing from the top. Cool. Let's start with the easier parts that are not under tension. The minute wheel goes off, then the intermediate wheel and the setting wheel. Now this part here, I guess it would be the yoke spring, is pressing quite strong, so I need to push it away so I can remove this little guy. Okay. And now we can take off the rest. That would be the yoke and the setting lever. To remove the spring itself, I will use some Rodico. This is the safest way, so it doesn't fly across the room. Perfect. Oh, it's actually fixed to the movement. You can see these two small holes on the main plate. I still have no idea what this is, but let's try the same thing. This one doesn't seem to move, and I'm afraid to force it and break it. So let's have a look under the microscope. Everything looks fine here, but wait. Look at this brass part laying on top of it. I don't think this is meant to be removed. Well, good I didn't force it. Let's finish with the last bit of the keyless works. That is the female part of the stem. Since it's split in two sections, this is how this one is called, and the male part is the one attached to the crown. And there we have the winding pinion and sliding clutch that fell. We still didn't find the reason yet why the watch was not running, but there is still one very important part to inspect, and that is the mainspring, so let's have a look. Oh, wow, I completely missed that before. This looks like, again, a pool of dried oil that I guess leaked out of the hole for the barrel arbor. Now, to open this, we have to slide the tweezers around it and push down. Good. Then we can remove the lid. Ah, we found it. Take a look at this. The mainspring, you'll see now, is split in half. And that's why we kept turning the crown and nothing happened. This is unfortunately quite common with these types of mainsprings. You can see the metal has a purple shade, and that's because this is a carbon steel mainspring. The problem with this is that they become what's called tired, which means that with time they get deformed and they lose their strength, and are also more likely to break. From the mid-1940s, all these mainsprings got replaced by the modern ones, made with different alloys that had higher elastic limits, so they were able to keep their shape. The inside of the barrel is as dirty as the outside as we expected, but the good news is that the solvents used in the watch cleaning machine are specially made to dissolve these old oil residues, so everything should come out looking almost brand new. All the disassembled parts go into the mesh baskets, the bigger ones, bridges and plates at the bottom, and the smaller ones go into the compartments on the upper trays, so we can keep parts of the same mechanism together. All of it will go directly into the watch cleaning machine, but first let's have a look at the case. Now, the cool thing about these old pocket watches is that in many of them, the cases were made out of silver or other precious metals because stainless steel was not widely used yet and iron was known to corrode. The crystal is not looking great, already beyond repair. As we know, our case is made of silver, and unfortunately silver gets tarnished with age and turns into this brownish color, but before we can get into the cleaning we have to figure out how to remove the rest of the stem, so I'll try grabbing the end with these pliers and unscrewing the crown. Okay. There is this piece. Oops. This piece of a metal on the bench. That's not good. Let's remove the stem first and have a look. There you go. The stem looks in good shape. And maybe the metal piece is coming from the inside? I do see some kind of ring inside, but I don't know how to take it out. It seems to me that's screwed inside of the pendant tube, so we have to find something that fits exactly in the grooves. Let's give a shot to the Swiss knife, just in case. No, this is also too big. Okay, this fits perfectly. Now I just need to turn it, maybe with the pliers again. Okay. Well, not very fast, but it's unscrewing. In the end, it was a pusher from the jeweling tool that did the job, and now we can see what it is and where that small metal bit comes from. Well, it's definitely one of the size of this tube, which I'm guessing is there to hold the stem centered. We can now start cleaning the parts that we put in the baskets before. The first jar is full with the watch cleaning solvent from Elma, and these other two have the same rinsing solution, so we rinse it twice to make sure there are no residues left. By the way, if you're interested in watch content in general, not only project updates but also new tools, books and interesting watches, feel free to follow on Instagram. The case won't be as easy to clean, but let's see how it goes. The first step is to put it in the ultrasonic bath together with the crown, and I will run it for 15 to 20 minutes. And this is the result. It looks much better already. We got rid of the brown tarnish, but there are a couple of things to look at. One is that the silver has sort of a matte finish now, and the second one is that there are some dark spots all over the case. These black spots are silver sulfide stains, and those appear due to a chemical reaction between silver and sulfur-containing substances in the air. This is what's known as tarnishing, and it goes from brown to black in the deepest parts. There's an easy way to remove this, and we only need 3 ingredients. The first one is aluminum foil. The second one is a couple of spoons of baking soda. Now we place the case inside, making sure all the parts are touching the foil. And the last ingredient is boiling water, so we pour water over it until the case is covered. Mixing baking soda and boiling water creates an alkaline solution, which is a solution with a high pH. And when we add the aluminum foil to the mix, we create a chemical reaction where the sulfur atoms from the tarnished silver are transferred to the aluminum foil. So theoretically, the black spots we saw on the case should disappear and end up in the foil. I'm not sure how much time I should have it inside. It's been there for half an hour now, so let's see how it looks. It's a bit better, but I can still see some black spots on the side of the case that we have to get rid of. So I think I'm going to repeat the process and wrap the aluminum foil a bit better. Okay, it's been 1 hour now, and this time wrapped completely, so all sides of the case are touching the aluminum, and I can already tell this time worked much better. Now the case is the color it's supposed to be, so we got rid of the tarnish, but the surface still doesn't look too good. Compare it with the inner case back here. This has been protected for many years, and we still have the original polished surface, which is what we're looking for. Now, the only way to get that finish back is to polish the case. This is a set of polishing paste, and the red one here called Rouge is specific for gold and silver. Polishing cases is a bit of a controversial topic, specifically when restoring vintage watches. The reason is that collectors tend to prefer watches that are completely untouched, even if it was done by the manufacturer, which, by the way, it was standard practice when watches were sent back for service, can affect the value of a watch. We apply a bit of rouge onto the polishing point, and then we go over the entire surface of the case, starting from the sides. I personally avoid polishing cases most of the times. I think the case of a watch, even if it's scratched, is part of the charm and the story of the vintage piece. But that being said, it has to be looked on a case-by-case basis, and I would say here it's necessary. In this case, we're not looking for a complete mirror finish. I don't mind keeping all scratches or dents, but I want to remove this ugly matte finish that we ended up with after the cleaning. It's interesting because when buying vintage watches, at least when speaking about sought-after models, the better someone took care of a watch in terms of bringing it back for service, the less valuable it is today. That's the paradox of condition, as Eric Wynn puts it. Okay, we are done polishing, so now back to the ultrasonic bath to remove all the polishing paste from the case. And have a look at this. It took much longer than expected, but we brought the case back to its original shine. I think we did a good job. I didn't want to polish the case back too much because I was worried that I would start even slightly removing the stripes and the shield from the back, but it came out looking great. Now with the case done, we can go ahead and start assembling the movement. I got a new mainspring to replace the broken one. Actually, I got 2 new mainsprings because I wanted to replace it for one of the newer models, but that didn't work out. And I'll show you what the problem is. This one here is the broken one. And you see that in the end, it has what's called the bridle, which is a small metal piece going in the other direction to catch the barrel side when it's fully wound. And this shape here is the one that most watches have. The problem, and the reason I had to get another mainspring, is that the one we need has a special kind of bridle shaped like a T, which I don't think it's used often anymore, and we know that because of these small openings on the side of the barrel. This is where the T-section on the end of the mainspring sits, and there is another matching opening on the barrel lid to anchor the mainspring. I've never installed one of these mainsprings, but I'm assuming there's not much difference. So first we need to find the size that fits the barrel. This one will do. And as always, we use the mainspring winder. Now that I'm thinking, I'm hoping that the T-section slides inside of the hole in the barrel, and there's no other tool needed, but I guess we'll see it soon enough. This is arguably the most useful tool in watch repair aside from tweezers and screwdrivers. The mainspring has to be wound very tightly, and this makes things very easy. Basically, the inner coil gets hooked to the arbor, which is part of the handle, and when you turn it, the mainspring winds up inside the tool. It can be done by hand, so you have to place the outer part of the spring first into the barrel, and then turning slowly, you feed the rest of the coil towards the inside. But I would not recommend doing that because there is a high risk of damaging or kinking the spring. There you can see the mainspring coil, and now we just push it out of the tool into the barrel itself, which is the best part. Let's have a look. Great! It's maybe a bit hard to see, but the T-section is popping out of the hole, which is what we were looking for. Now, the center of the coil has to be aligned with the hole in the barrel, and we place the arbor in the middle. Always checking first to not put it upside down, and a good indicator for that is the position of the hook. For the mainspring to coil, the arbor must turn counterclockwise if we're looking from this side. So if we would place the arbor upside down, the hook would not grab the mainspring and the watch wouldn't wind. Now we finish this by placing the barrel lid on top, making sure that the other side of the T-section pops out of the small slot on the lid. There you go. Perfect. Good, let's start putting everything together. These jewel holes are always tricky. I sometimes find dry oil leftovers stuck inside, even coming out of the watch cleaning machine. So with some pegwood first and then some Rodico, we can make sure that we don't have any residue left. Now we have 4 wheels that make up the train of wheels. This is the escape wheel. Okay. The 4th wheel with an extended pivot in watches with a sub-second dial like this one. We make sure they're straight, and now the 3rd wheel goes in. And before placing the 2nd wheel, we have to fit what would be the 1st wheel, which is actually the mainspring barrel. The barrel goes underneath the 3rd wheel, and the last one is the 2nd wheel, also called center wheel. Okay. To fix all these wheels in place, we have a couple of bridges. This one here is the barrel bridge, and is the easiest one to place since there are no jewels on top. This one secures the barrel and the 2nd wheel in place, and on top of it, we have the crown wheel, the ratchet wheel, the click, and the rest of the keyless work. The ratchet wheel is the one that goes on top of the square portion of the barrel arbor that you see poking out. This one here is a bit more tricky. This is the train of wheels bridge and has 3 jewels on top, which are actually synthetic rubies, and these have holes where the wheel pivots go through. The problem is that if we were to place this on top and press down, and it just happens that one of these pivots is not well aligned with the jewel hole, we will definitely break it and have to replace that wheel. So this needs a bit more patience. Using a microscope also helps if you have one, and usually how I do it is make sure that the 3rd and 4th wheel pivots are in, and then grab the escape wheel carefully with the tweezers and try to kind of move it, tweak it a bit while slowly pressing the bridge down until it clicks in place. The way to check if it's correctly placed is to carefully spin either the barrel or the 2nd wheel and see if all the wheels are spinning before placing the screws. If there's something wrong, the train of wheels will be usually blocked. Okay, a bit of oil in the barrel arbor. This one is called D5, and we have to make it trickle inside of the barrel. For the pivots on the smaller wheels, we use 9010, which is an oil that's a bit more liquid. Always back and front side of the movement. Speaking of the movement, this is an 18.5 linear NVS3 movement from Zenith. So not your usual caliber name, but a ligne is an old French measuring unit from before the metric system was a thing. So 18.5 lignes refers to its diameter, which would be something like 41.6 millimeters. The NVS stands for Nouveau Vers Savonnette, which basically means that this was part of a new series of movements that Zenith released in the early 1900s, and it was used for both open-face pocket watches like the one we have, and hunter-type pocket watches. These hunter pocket watches are the ones that have a front case over the crystal. They come from the UK when fox hunting was a popular sport, and the hunters used these watches while riding horses. They have a pusher on top of the crown usually to open this front case, and the pusher is at 3 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock. And the idea is that the rider can use them with one hand while holding the horse reins with the other one. Good. Now, this is the click spring, which is the last part to assemble on top of the bridge. It's quite strong, so let's hold it down and then we can bend it. Perfect. This is not the usual click spring design that we see nowadays, and the way this works is that here the end of the spring is making pressure against one side of the click. In that way, the other side is always engaged with the ratchet wheel so that it doesn't spin backwards. The click hitting the ratchet wheel is the noise you hear when you're winding the watch. We are very close to know if we brought this back to life or not. This is a pallet fork going in as straight as we can. And then the bridge goes on top of it under the 2nd wheel. Oop. Okay, that seems in place. The pallet fork has two jewels called the pallet stones, and they are kind of rectangular instead of round. The reason is that they are specially shaped to interact with the escape wheel. So when the watch is working, they catch and release the teeth of the escape wheel. I will show you now, but first we wind up the watch a bit so we have some power stored in the mainspring. Because we don't have the keyless works in place yet, we have to turn the arbor from the top with a screwdriver. Let's get the balance wheel ready. And now, when we flick the end of the pallet fork, we should see that it bounces back and forth like that. This is a good sign that everything is working. The balance wheel goes in, and that movement that we did with the tweezers is exactly what the balance is for. And let's say, there you go, working again. This is without a doubt the best feeling of the hobby, once you see the balance wheel ticking again after so many years. Great. We only gave the mainspring enough power to start the watch, but we need a full wind on before testing the accuracy, otherwise the amplitude will be lower than usual. But now that we are here, we can remove this cap jewel and clean it. As you know, this has already gone through the previous cleaning cycle, but it's always tricky for the solvents to get in between both jewels, so it's always good practice to disassemble it and clean it with this product called B-Dip, which is special for stubborn oil residue. The difference with this when compared to the rest of the cleaning products we have is that this one dries almost instantly, so we know that we won't leave any moisture behind when we assemble it. We add a bit of fresh oil for the balance wheel pivot. The cap jewel goes in. And now we can screw down the cover plate, if I manage to put it back on top. Good. This is the side of the movement where the dial sits, and also the parts that allow to set the time and wind the watch, starting with the winding pinion and the sliding clutch, which are these two here. The sliding clutch is the taller one with the groove in the middle, which is where the yoke sits. Now, when we pull the crown out to the setting position, what we're doing is making the sliding clutch slide forward. You can see there's a bit of room for it to move and engage with a set of wheels that move the hands. Now that these two are in and the stem is oiled, we can set it in place. Or half of the stem in this case, since the male side goes attached to the case. The square section has to go through the square hole in the sliding clutch, so we turn it until it slides inside. All the parts in the keyless works are constantly moving, so we have to make sure that everything is well greased, starting with these pivots. And now we can start the puzzle with all the small parts we removed before. The cannon pinion just went in, and now the second wheel, intermediate wheel, and setting wheel, which is the one engaging directly with the sliding clutch and has a bit of excess grease on top. Good. Since I'm working mostly on watches from the 60s and 70s, all the keyless works have a very similar look, so it's quite cool to get to work on a watch from 40 years earlier and see all these different parts. Okay, now the yoke goes in place. As we mentioned before, part of it goes into the sliding clutch groove. And on top of it, we have this little lever that helps moving the yoke back and forth. In between those, we have the setting lever squeezed in. We have to make a bit of room. And again, we grease all the sides that are touching each other. The last piece of the puzzle is the spring, which I guess it would be the setting lever spring. It's very strong, so we hold it down while putting it in place. Otherwise, otherwise it can fly across the room, so I'm glad that didn't happen. To secure all of this, the bridge goes in. Usually in modern watches, the setting lever spring and the bridge are the same part, which simplifies things a bit. And good news, I discovered what this sliding part is for. It's meant to slide upwards to block the watch in the winding position, so it's easier to wind during service. And you will see why that's needed, because unfortunately I figured it out too late and I don't have it in place now. That's not too bad, the watch can still be wound, but now you see that the stem is popping out of the movement. So to engage with the winding mechanism, I have to first push it in like that and then turn. If I had the slider up, the female part of the stem would be tucked in and I wouldn't have to push it every time. But at least we found out what it's for. So now we give slowly the watch a full wind, and then we can check how things look in the time grapher. Oh, not too good, to be honest. The bit error is way off at 4.5 degrees, that's not acceptable. And the bitrate is at 71 seconds per day, also quite bad, so we have to adjust it. This is a good indicator of a high bit error. We're looking at the pallet fork from the top in a resting position, and it should be exactly in the middle of the two banking pins, which is not. And that means that the impulse joule underneath the balance is not correctly centered. When that happens, the balance oscillates asymmetrically. That means that it turns more towards one side than the other, and it's what shows in the time grapher as a high bit error. We have a couple of different ways to correct this. There's no easy one here, because in this balance we don't have a bit error regulator. This came in later than the 1930s. And what we want ultimately is to change the position of the impulse joule. To do that, we can disassemble the balance, or we can carefully insert a screwdriver through the hairspring into the collet slot right here, and then we have to turn it, which will also turn the impulse joule underneath. This is a bit riskier because if the screwdriver slips, it will most likely king the hairspring, which is why I'm not able to record this while I'm doing it. This is actually after at least 8 adjustments, so let's see how we're doing. Good, finally, we got the bit error down to 0.5, which is already very good, and the amplitude is excellent, above 300 degrees. Now that this is corrected, we're still at plus 41 seconds of rate, and it's just a matter of adjusting the regulator until we get close to 0. And there you go, that is perfect. 4 seconds, 1 second, excellent. We now have a working movement, but most of the character of a watch comes from the dial, and this one is not in good shape. There are a couple of tools we can use to clean it, but we have to be careful. Enamel dials clean particularly well, but other types of dials can get damaged very easily. So before attempting to clean any dial, it's important to understand the materials that the dial is made of and what exactly the problem is. It can be corrosion, it can be degradation of the paint, it can be degradation of the lacquer, and it can be dirt. This last one seems to be our case, so we start by gently brushing away the debris that's just laying on top. That was not much, everything seems to be well stuck, so let's try with some Rodico now. Rodico is quite sticky, so that's working well, but most of this dirt has been here for almost a century and it's really stuck. The, let's say, superficial dirt is off, so now we have to get in and gently rub the darker spots with a special Q-tip for dial cleaning soaked in water. It's important to not apply too much pressure, and I would not use anything else than water in any dial. And this is working great. That's the beauty of these enamel dials. Even if there are cracks, you only see them when there's dirt inside. If they're clean, the cracks are almost invisible. The sub-seconds dial seems to be made differently. It doesn't have a smooth texture like the rest of the dial, and it cleans a bit, but not as well. I'm afraid to start peeling away the layers here until we reach the paint and damage the numbers, so I'm gonna stop here before I regret it. The last thing we do is removing any traces of dust. This dial cleaning pen has a very soft pad on the other end, which works also for cleaning crystals. And we just go once more over it. And this is it, the final result. Quite an improvement, to be honest. We managed to remove all the dirt in the center of the dial, and we can't see the crack anymore, which is great. Let's have a look at the hands now. They look okay, to be honest. I could leave them as it is, and I was not planning on doing much. But considering how dirty the dial was, I thought I might give them a quick brush. The hands are quite delicate, so we need to work on a flat surface. This is a pithwood slice that works quite well, and we just do the same with some water to remove any dirt that might be on top. Good. As a last step here, I will use this leather stick. Leather is slightly abrasive, and it can be used as a last finish when you're polishing, so it will help to leave them a bit shinier. Now we just do the rest with the minute hand and the seconds hand, carefully to not bend them, otherwise they will hit each other and stop the watch when we install them. Okay, after a long time cleaning, I can't believe it, but I think we're ready. If you remember, when we removed that screw down part inside the pendant tube, which I found out it's called the sleeve, one of the flaps was broken, so I got a replacement one. This one has the same diameter, but it's a bit shorter than the original. I couldn't find exactly the right size, but I was told this is not an issue. We just have to screw it a bit deeper inside the tube because the stem still needs to rest in the same position as before. I can screw here the beginning with my fingers, but to leave it at the right spot, we have to use the same method as before. Okay. Well, a bit slow, but it does the job. A bit more. Okay. And that seems about right. I will show you how it works, but let's insert the movement holder, making sure we align the hole on both parts to be able to fit the stem through. Okay, good. And now from the inside we insert it through the sleeve so it catches the stem around one of its grooves. In the end, the screw thread should end up on the other side. Good. Then the idea is that when you pull the stem out, the sleeve jumps past that groove and it changes to the time setting position. Something else I wanted to replace is the crown. The original one is yellow. That means that it was not made out of silver, but probably nickel plated, and now we only have the brass underneath left. Apart from that, it's also very worn down, as you can see, so I got this new one here with the same style but looking much better. I also didn't manage to find any original one in good shape because in 99% of these pocket watches the plating is already gone. And now you can see how the sleeve works, allowing the stem to change positions. This is the original crystal, very yellow after so many years and also cracked in several places. And these two are the replacement ones I got. I was not sure of which model it was, so I got them both to compare. They are 42 millimeters, which is what the original one measures, but one of them is domed and the other one is thinner and a bit flatter. This is the domed one. Hard to believe it used to look the same. This is one of the disadvantages with acrylic crystals. They tend to yellow a lot. Okay, so domed on the right, flat on the left. Both look okay, but let's compare it with the one we had. This one looks quite similar, slightly higher, but not by much. And this other one, no. This looks too flat and also feels a bit flimsy. So let's go ahead with the domed one. Now, to install this is not as convenient as with wristwatches. We have to have the price a bit higher so that the case can hang. We put the dice in, almost the largest ones I have, but I'm glad I finally get to use them. And the way this works is the same as with all acrylic crystals. They are flexible, so we bend them to reduce their diameter a little, slide the case upwards, and then we unscrew the press slowly to let it expand inside the case. And we're done. Perfect. We can finally assemble everything together, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure I can live with this yellow sub-seconds dial, so as a last resort, I will try something that I would definitely not advise. I'm going to use toothpaste to try to remove the yellow residue out of the dial. First, we dilute it a bit with water. and then we mix it until it blends. We use the same type of Q-tip as before, and the idea is that toothpaste has very small abrasive crystals inside that can scratch the dirt off, hopefully without removing anything else. If we had to be careful before, now we have to be extremely careful and put very, very light pressure onto the dial, because this will certainly reach the paint layer if we press too much, and if we do, the dial is gone. We can throw it in the trash. But so far, it's looking promising. Wow, look at that. I really thought the paint was going to come off at some point, but it seems that it worked perfectly. Let's just take it out of here and rinse it with water before we say anything. And we carefully remove all the toothpaste from the surface. I mean, look at this. I was more scared of ruining the dial than anything else, but this is far beyond any expectations. Let's make sure it's completely dry before we put it back in. We definitely don't want any moisture inside the movement. And let's have another look at the end result. Amazing. Well, seems that we got away with that, so now let's finish this. Right under the dial we have the hour wheel, and on top of that, the dial washer. Don't forget that the crown goes at 12 o'clock here, and we just have to place the dial feet through both of the holes in the movement. There you go. We have the dial feet screws, 2 of them on opposite sides of the movement, and those ones screw down into the feet themselves to keep the dial fixed in position. One done, and now the other one. Time to install the hands with the hand setting tool. You can see around the tool itself there are different adapters, so depending on the size of the hands we're working with, we have to use one or the other. The hour hand goes first, and we press it in place. The minute hand goes on top. It's always easier to align them when the hands are set at 12 o'clock, and this one sits on top of the cannon pinion. And as you know, the last one is the tiny seconds hand with the smaller adapter we have going onto the 4th wheel extended pivot. Everything is ready to go inside the case. Let's just blow away any dust particles from the dial and from the crystal. Although here we can always open it easily from the front if we see something inside. We have to pull the stem first and then insert the movement in the same way we took it out. So the upper section goes in first. We have to line the square stem inside the movement. There you go. Good. Now, this is still not secured in place. The way we do this is with the movement screws that we removed at the beginning, which are the ones sitting right at the edge, pressing the sides of the movement against the case. The first ones we always remove and the last ones to go back in place. And what a journey this restoration was. I can't believe we finally finished the job, but here we are. We close the inner case back, make sure they're tight. Now the outer one, and bam! There it is, a beautiful Zenith pocket watch. Final check to see if the hand setting mechanism works. No problems there, let's wind it a bit. And there you have it. There's something very special about these pocket watches, something that sends you back in time and gives you a glimpse of watchmaking history and how far watches have come. And most important, I'm glad we managed to bring this one back to life. I'm sure the Meyer-Bolliger family would be happy, and I'm very thankful to you for coming along in the restoration. I hope you enjoyed it, thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.